For more on the situation in Libya, let's now cross to Chris Nineham from Stop the War Coalition. He's in London. Thanks very much indeed for joining us here on RT. Well, with France, the UK and the United States calling for further intervention there in Libya, some NATO countries, like Italy, have refused to participate in the bombardment. So what does that actually tell us about the current status of the alliance?
Well, I mean, it's clear there's very big splits in the alliance. I mean, on the one hand, you have people who basically want to stick to the UN resolution, which talks about defending civilians and you know, has very limited aims. On the other hand, you have the US, Britain, and France who have now come clean and come off the fence and said that that they are effectively said that they are going for regime change with this intervention, which is, you know, which is something that's not covered in the resolution, is as far as I can see, illegal. And you know, ratchets up the situation in a very dangerous way. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised there are splits given that kind of level of aggression.
But if this humanitarian mission has failed, as it seems to have done so far, surely the humane thing to do is to remove Gaddafi. That'll bring an end to the conflict, bring an end to the deaths of civilians. So that's a very good reason to topple him, isn't it? That gives them an excuse to do so.
Well, I mean, leaving aside the question of the legality of the operation, everything that we have learned from Iraq and from Afghanistan tells us, and should have told the Western governments, that you cannot bomb a country into democracy or liberation. You cannot create progress in a country by launching cruise missiles at it. In fact, what you find is the opposite happens. Civilians die. Very often the current regime actually becomes strengthened by the attack, because Gaddafi, after all, from the start was trying to characterise the opposition as being stooges of the West. Well, now that particular characterisation will appear to have a lot more weight with people in Libya, and you know, so far they've got nowhere when it comes to their attempts to remove Gaddafi. So I fail to see how intensifying the bombing is going to do anything more than increase the level of violence, increase the level of suffering of the Libyan people, and kind of entrench the civil war and make it possibly spread it throughout the country. Well, therefore, so I think it's an absolute disaster. Well,
surely, as you said a little earlier, many say that it's got nowhere, but surely now, looking at the situation, bearing in mind what has happened, and you can't really change what has happened now, isn't the best way to end this conflict and do what France is now pushing for, and that is create a new UN resolution, which presumably may mean allowing ground troops into Libya, and that will end the conflict for good, won't it? Isn't that the right thing to do now?
This is what we hear in Afghanistan. This is what we heard. One more push and it'll all be all right. You know, okay, it's terrible. We've devastated the country. We've killed hundreds of thousands of people. But one more push and it'll be okay. In Afghanistan, okay, it's a bad situation, but we just one more push to Kandahar and everything will sort itself out. The fact of the matter is that military intervention doesn't bring liberation, doesn't bring progress. It creates carnage, it creates misery, and it tends to generate a spiral of violence in a country.
The Russian foreign minister, let me ask you quickly, the Russian foreign minister is calling for a diplomatic way to resolve this. How do you see that working now?
Well, I mean, you know, we have to get away from the idea as people sitting in the Western powers or in the capitals of the historically the so-called great powers. We have to get away from the idea that the future of countries like Libya should be determined in the capitals of the big powers. These questions are questions for the Libyans themselves. It's a very bad situation. It's been made much worse by Western intervention. The basic democratic position is to say, get the West out, stop the bombing, and let the Libyans sort this situation out for themselves.
But isn't not that very difficult when you're not too sure who the opposition is? The rebels don't seem to be making up a coherent organisation.
You don't need to know who the opposition is to stop bombing a country. We know where Libya is. We know we're bombing it. We shouldn't be. We should stop it. I mean, that's the first step. And in a way, that's the thing that we in the West can have most influence over. You know, I mean, in my opinion, you can't reach a kind of a democratic or a peaceful solution to a problem while a foreign country or a series of foreign great powers, which by the by have a history of colonial intervention into the region going back 100 years, are dropping large amounts of munitions on your population. So the West should back off and stop believing that it has the right to determine the future of countries in North Africa, the Middle East or anywhere else.
Chris Nineham, very interesting to hear what you have to say. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us live here on RT. Chris Nineham there from Stop the War Coalition in London. Thank you for your time.